In regards to the Thunder Warriors and their rapid ebbing from Terran history, most lore and stories can be disregarded as myths and interpretations at best, lies and falsehoods at worst. However, despite the shroud of mystery that surrounds those soldiers of old, one tale of their demise is mentioned over and over in stories told by the nomadic tribes surrounding Mount Ararat. As the weary yet victorious Thunder Warriors returned to the mountain, a group of unknown warriors awaited their return. Upon their meeting, the Thunder Warriors were not met with salutes and congratulations, but rather a hail of bolter rounds and plasma. In these tales told around the campfires, this new army is described as clad in all gray, dark as the clouds of a storm, and branded all as one. It could be speculated that this event was the initial mission of the Emperor's First Legion, for these warriors all bore the numeral 1 upon their armor, and of course the fact that many missions and theaters of the uncrowned princes were frequently removed from the records of the Imperium of Man. There is no physical trace of evidence in the Imperial Palace archives that can tell us for certain of the events that took place on Mount Ararat. However, anecdotal stories in the late years of the Great Crusade tell of their near-obsessive preoccupation of locating and destroying the few handful of Thunder Warriors that had scattered throughout the Imperium and beyond, over and above the Imperial Court's standing orders regarding renegades. On 3 known occasions, Dark Angel fleets have changed course on the mere rumor of Thunder Warrior survivors in order to engage and eliminate. These stories insinuate an almost personal vendetta. However, with the secrecy of the First Legion, we may never know the truth. Hello and welcome to another episode of Heresy Grad School, Dark Angels. I'm Jesse. I'm your guest lecturer for this series, and I'm here with David, Pat, and Jason.
Hey guys.
Hey.
What's going on, dudes?
This is episode 2 of our Dark Angels coverage of Book 9 Crusade, and starting off with a retelling of one of the boxes on page 85, I believe it is.
Yeah. Branded all as one.
Which is really cool because it syncs up with the story we know from Valdor. We talked a little bit about Valdor and a couple other books. I think Saturnine was featured in there, but we talked about sort of how the Black Library and Forge World, have this ongoing conversation, and the lore gets sort of built out from there. And I think it's really cool to see that shout out to the sort of the culmination of the Thunder Warriors' extermination in Valdor. So, because that's what happened, right?
Yeah, that story is pretty well detailed in that novel. And like I said, the third act, spoilers, of course, but...
Yeah, and I love the way they sort of make it unreliable from a narrator perspective, right? Like, of course, it's shrouded in secrecy because First Legion, Dark Angels, but why would they have changed courses, 3 times to hunt down stragglers of the Thunder Warriors? Also, how cool is it that there's stragglers of the Thunder Warriors out there in the galaxy that they'd have to, hunt down? That's, I love that, because I don't think we've read that book yet.
Yeah, not to mention the obvious parallel of the Fallen in 40K.
Yes.
Which I thought was quite an interesting shout out. And also thanks, I believe it was Andrew N. on our Discord, who also mentioned about, he asked a question regarding, is that story told about the disappearance of the Night Lord, or of the Thunder Warriors in any of the novels? And yeah, it's in Valdor, and it's also mentioned in Book 9. He was asking if Book 9 supported that theory, and this is where it's at.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for the feedback, Andrew, and definitely to our listeners, if you guys keep it coming. But we always love to read it. We throw it around in the chat and kick it back and forth. So appreciate that.
Get stuck down a couple rabbit holes, no big deal.
We're here now, so
right.
That's the important part.
So, do we want to get into the Emperor's Own Angels of Death?
Yeah, let's get into it. Jason, you want to take it away?
I will do my darndest.
Alrighty.
All right, guys. So, let's see here. One of the things that jumped out at me most that I think was kind of interesting, starting here on page 86, The Emperor's Own Angels of Death, the first lines here: "This was an honor they would bear throughout the war to unify soul and beyond, a duty that kept them separate from the other legions created in their image." So the thing that kind of sets the First Legion apart, more so than you would otherwise maybe think of, is that they are basically the template for everything. Not only that, they're also, as much as they are the template for the other smaller legions that are slowly starting to reach nominal strength, that are really getting geared up to, a usable strength to start off the Great Crusade, the First Legion is always sort of kept separate from the others just by the virtue of them being this sort of primogenitor for the rest of the legions. And it's something that did definitely set them apart. And it probably did a great deal to kind of mold what that original picture of the First Legion was. So it said this is a duty they accepted without complaint, and they took pride in it because they were selected for it, that role, even though it was solitary by the Emperor. They were his Angels of Death, a name at the time belonged to just the Dark Angels. And for almost a decade, they are kind of stuck by themselves in the lightless depths of the edges of the Sol system, burning all of these just frozen moons of the outer system and freeing up lost outposts of mankind that are still kind of at the very outermost edges of the Sol system. And again, this is the very first footsteps into taking into the stars in the Great Crusade. This is just comparatively very fledgling, empire building inside just of the Sol system.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, too, where that sort of informal network of specialists within the First Legion starts to become the first of the orders we originally know and love, before they get dedicated into the different wings. So this goes beyond the wider scope of those hosts and a craft honed in the battles at the outer edge of Sol. And two, this is where some of those more complex, the Dark Angels are very ritualistic. They love omens, they love ciphers, several different types of ciphers. I didn't mean to make that pun.
There you go.
Oh, we have a laugh track? That. Fantastic.
Right?
Oh, actually, sorry, listeners. That's really our studio audience. If you want to become part of our studio audience, feel free to sign up for our Patreon. Was that good enough?
We can make some
out of what's that. Entertaining, and one thing we have up on the Big Bang Theory, we're still fun even if you take the laugh track out.
Ooh.
If you guys have never seen the Big Bang Theory without the laugh track, it is the creepiest thing to ever exist. YouTube it. But
I think most 90s and 2000s comedies are that way.
Oh, God, tell me about it.
It's so awkward. But anyway.
Sorry, I'm getting distracted.
Back to a galaxy burning.
Right. So, not only are these orders starting to form, they're also starting to really become entrenched in the way the Legion does war. Because it's not just a way of battle, it's also sort of the ascertaining the weaknesses of each of the foes they're fighting, and they're sort of encoded into the traditions of the orders and basically the secrets of war they're coming across as they develop themselves. They're sort of cataloged into these archives that the First Legion is naturally building. So now, too, interestingly, their armor is no longer that generic flat gray of all the other just numbered legions, but now it's black. And as they return, as bearing the color scheme of the new, what would be eventually the Dark Angels, they don't receive like this proud fanfare. It's not a celebration as they return. They're just returning to sort of this silent approval that the Emperor has shown them, that they're now sort of the vanguard of the hosts mustered ready to make war upon a hostile galaxy.
Just straight up
So,
embodying grimdark.
exactly. They are almost literally grimdark. Now, a little bit later, big giant muster around the shipyards at Saturn. The fleet granted to the First Legion stood out among the newly built Saturnine pattern vessels and ancient ships reawakened from the macrovaults of Mars. So what's interesting here, the First Legion were granted a tithe of the very few remaining Terran vessels, and almost all of these craft were absolute relics. They dated back before even Old Knights. So this is tons of forgotten technology. These are relics that have been developed so far back that they're basically from that golden age before everything just went to, galactic hell. And among these, of course, you've got Gloriana-class battleships, you have Promethean-class cruisers, Tiamat-class destroyers, and all of these kind of completely surpass their more modern designs. And in other legions, you're seeing like a handful of some of these ancient relic ships, but the First Legion has an entire fleet of them.
So, Jason and Dave, because you both are more, and again, we may need to bring Austin and Steven onto this at some point, but you guys are more our BFH, BFE, or BFG guys. What is a Promethean class cruiser? I don't think I've ever heard of that until this point.
Yeah, we'll have to bring our subject matter experts on that one.
Yeah. That may be something we need to do a deep dive on, because I don't even know if we have that in our Heresy rules. Either a Promethean class cruiser or a Tiamat class destroyer. But that'd be something to look into.
So I actually looked up the Tiamat. To the best of my knowledge, yeah, it looks like the same thing with the Promethean too. To the best of my knowledge, this entry here in Book 9 is the only place that Tiamat and the Promethean have been referenced so far. So I think these are brand new. I would absolutely love to be proven wrong.
I feel like I've heard Tiamat before, but I could be mistaken as well.
I feel like I had too, and I was combing back through I had the Rogue Trader first edition compendium out, just leaping through it, because I could not remember where I'd seen it before. But if it exists somewhere else, I have not been able to find it yet.
It's definitely not in the Battlefleet Heresy book we got.
Yeah.
Go to rr30k.com/something.
It's
But
there. You can find it.
But I will say, listeners, that's part of your homework for this week. Do some research. Find that stuff out for us, and we'll come back to you.
Find us Promethean destroyers Promethean cruisers and Tiamat destroyers. They have to exist somewhere.
But God, they do sound cool. Just a cruiser covered in void shields, and then a destroyer that's just studded with weapons. But
it sounds amazing. But checking out the rest of the Emperor's Own here. So this is not an idle gift. It's not just something the Emperor is, it's not a participation trophy. The First Legion are not sitting on their laurels. They are putting these ships to use because as the Great Crusade is getting started, the First Legion are dedicated to eradicating some of the hardest and most monstrous Xenos races they're running across. And out of all of the original Legiones Astartes, they make the most common use of some of the weapons from Old Knight, like gene-phage weapons, rad-phage, like some of the really nasty stuff that normally you don't think of outside of the Mechanicum. They're using it to wipe out nests of enemies that are too horrendous to be faced in open battle. And the First Legion are sort of this fulcrum that the Emperor is building these attacking forces on. Because they're not just used like the other legions, they're used to absolutely annihilate what needs to be killed. And this is why, starting out, their little sobriquet is the Angels of Death. And even though this will eventually, come to encompass sort of generically all Adeptus Astartes, or Legiones Astartes at the time, starting out here, that's something that belongs to just the First Legion. So even as these other legions are fighting to bring human colonies, discovered by these expeditionary fleets back into compliance, the First Legion isn't so much worried about that. The First Legion is more tasked with wiping things out instead of bringing things into the Imperium. So they're pretty much hurling themselves into the hardest fighting and the worst, things they're finding out here on the galaxy. I really like one of the lines here. They took war to the dens of monsters and legends without fear or hesitation, shattering the hold of nightmares on the future of mankind. And that's really what they're doing. They're hurling themselves into things that are kind of too hard for any other legion. They have a couple of examples here of some of the battles the few battles that haven't been wiped out, with the first, out of the records that the First Legion has taken place in. So one they give here is Beltelgen 4, where the third chapter, formed mainly of warriors from the hosts of stone and iron, assaulted a world whose mountains and crusts had been hollowed out to form a fortress for a swarm creature of protoplasmic and hyperacidic slime, the nucleus of an infection that had spread through the void to infest a dozen worlds and seen millions rendered to little more than nutrient slurry. So this is right. So two things that I find interesting here. One, crazy swarm creature that basically sound like sentient acidic amoebas. But two, third chapter. It's interesting that they're already using the chapter designations here.
Yeah.
Another one of these battles we have, let's see, the once verdant worlds of the Asirene cluster, where the First Legion's 19th Expeditionary Fleet engaged a vast sentient planet killer, a technological abomination spawned by some long-forgotten empire and left to wreak havoc upon an uncaring universe. Now, this one, the records apparently not sealed too well, because we get a few details, but the records here sealed by Grandmaster Thrain himself. And these are some of the things they're fighting as the rest of the legions are kind of bringing things back into compliance.
So it sounds like just an AI planet killer. It's like,
yeah,
that could be anything and everything.
Right? It could be a Death Star, just
with
taking
an AI
over.
brain stuck to it.
Oh God, that would be the worst.
Yeah.
Just hovering around in space somewhere, deleting planets.
Yeah.
Whew.
The fact that it's mentions one and vast, so it's big and it's singular, so it's not like an army of Terminators.
Which is good.
That's no moon. It's a planet killer. God, that'd be horrifying though. Because I guess, but they have this fleet of that's gifted to them. I guess they have some way to destroy them at least.
Mm-hmm. Now,
a few Gloriana class battle cruisers could probably fix that.
Right.
Just a little.
Sorry, Jason, go ahead.
Oh, no worries. So, one of the things that may not be readily apparent, But since the First Legion are engaged with so many of these, sort of sealed missions that just aren't making it into the larger, the Imperium at large, what's interesting is by comparison to some of the other legions, like outside the ranks of the First Legion, some of their achievements in the early Great Crusade really seem lacking. So a lot of their triumphs, that a lot of the really impressive things they've done have essentially saved the galaxy without anybody knowing. They're shrouded in secrecy because they've been, locked down. And comparatively, it looks like they only have a few handfuls of worlds brought into compliance because hundreds of their actual battles have just been locked down and the details have never gotten out. However, one of the things that they are very widely known for, some of their original key doctrines were originally brought together to help form the original Principia Bellicosa. And that, of course, it's almost like, kind of like, well, it's the standard by which all Legiones Astartes, sort of their tactical manual, kind of like a precursor to the Codex Astartes.
Mm-hmm.
And the tactics from the hosts of the First Legion are what is kind of brought together in large part to develop that. So as they are, hosting, as the hosts are making war across all of these battlefields, they're not only passing their knowledge on to the battle brothers they're working with, but now they're doing so throughout the entirety of these doctrines being created. And some that are kind of struggling, some that are less effective will slowly fade out and kind of, they describe it here as being ground to extinction by the inexorable hunger of war, which is, kind of a dramatic way of describing those that are less efficient kind of fall to the wayside. But that brings us to the super interesting box on page 87, describing the hosts of the First Legion.
Hey, Jason, before you get there, because, but I think we covered some really important material over all of page 86, and I just kind of want to circle back on that. I think the first part is, the First Legion, which will become the Dark Angels, right now is... And I don't think this is sort of crass to say, they're making this up as they go, right? I think this is a very important doctrine. So the way the Space Marines will fight, the way the Space Marines will organize themselves in terms of organizational structure, taxonomy, hierarchy, none of that exists right now. I think it's something that we take for granted, and it's hard to sort of put ourselves into the mindset of what came before.
Right. Because we listen, we read these stories, 40K novels, Horus Heresy novels, and the Space Marine Legions are, for all intents and purposes, really well settled in.
Right.
As far as they know how to conduct, planetary compliance, stuff of that nature. But imagine being the first Space Marines and not knowing at all what to expect.
Right.
Being the first, humans more or less to travel the galaxy that we know of in decades, centuries, thousands of years.
Yeah, millennia, right? And so, I think this speaks to so much. So, the Emperor has set the First Legion a special quest, right? The Emperor, even though he has an enormous amount of foresight, we can get into that, if we need to, but the Emperor has sort of set the Proto-Astartes Legion on a special quest, and that is to define doctrine. As they go out into the galaxy, as they encounter the sort of unnumbered threats to species' existence, how do they develop the doctrine and tactics to counter that threat? Which is why they were given, their pick of a fleet, when when, the expeditionary fleet sort of went to Saturn and uncovered the Saturnine fleet and the Jovian shipyards and unlocked the macro vaults of Mars, right? I mean, there's just so much rich history in just, a few paragraphs on page 86, but it sort of speaks to the special sort of dispensation that the First Legion gets. They get to use weaponry that was outlawed during the Unification Wars, right? They get the rad phage and the virus bombs, right? They get to use all of that.
Even the abominable intelligence.
Yeah, probably.
Oh no, really? The Excendio. It's an AI in a robot body.
Right. Don't we have rules for that now too?
We have rules for it. Yeah.
Oh God.
No model yet, but
that's awesome.
Yeah.
But like all the best Forge World models or best 30K models, you really have to kit bash it.
Yeah, if you haven't checked out the rules yet, Dave, I'll bring you aside one day and check out the Excendio class Battle Automata. It is a pure AI.
No, I love that. That's amazing.
So, I will say we do have, thanks to the quick thinking of our guest lecturers, Stephen and Austin, we do have a little bit more info on the Tiamat. Just that in Book 3, it's known as a Bastion ship. So that may be related to it stays closer in towards your bigger ships and just provides fire support. It's one of those vague Navy terms that you could fill in anywhere. So just a fun little tidbit.
Perfect. Yeah.
But the offer still stands for our listeners if they find uncover some other long forgotten lore in some white dwarf number 3 or something. Feel free to share it with us.
Before we get into the hosts on page 87, which I think is really important as a starting point to understand the sort of organizational structure of the First Legion, throughout the rest of this podcast series, we're going to use some terms that I think you can use them loosely, but in the context of the Dark Angels, you would be sort of ill-informed to do that, right? So they have specific meanings in the context of the Dark Angels. So a host is something, a great host is something, an order is something, orders are something. So, and each one of those has sort of nuances and niches in and of itself. So we're going to try to be very specific, I think, in terms of our lexical appropriation. I don't know.
Lexicon.
I'm just making this up right now.
And as a side note to that, Dave, have you looked at page 108 and the sidebar or the insert there?
I have, but by all means, if you think
so, on the bottom, it kind of relates to the different levels of the Principia Bellicosa, the Hecatonistica, and the Hexagrammaton, which are other layers of the Dark Angels. So, like with the Principia Bellicosa, you have the Knight Praetor, Knight Commander, Knight Captain, and Knight as kind of most known use titles and ranks. Then of the Hecatonistica, we have the Preceptor, the Seneschal, the Cenobite, and the Adept. And of the Hexagrammaton, you have the Master, the Marshal, the Proctor, and the Initiative.
Yeah.
So
I thought that was...
you can
I
have
know, right?
so many titles depending on where you are within the ranks.
Circles within circles, and layers within layers, and sort of this is the thing about the Dark Angels that I really want to get into, because it establishes, I think, at the essence of who they are, their character, because they're a legion and a brotherhood that's shrouded in secrecy from the very beginning. The records are sealed, the deeds that they do, the missions that they accomplish on behalf of humanity, nobody gets to know. Even within the Order, even within the Dark Angels themselves, the Legion, those records are often sealed and only available to a few. So I think this starts to establish their character, and we can start to see why they are the way they are, the secrecy that exists. So at the same time that they are every legion, they're no legion.
Yeah.
And
it's like when we talk about secrecy, another legion we think about is obviously the Alpha Legion. I feel like the Alpha Legion is a lot of cloak and dagger secrecy. And Dark Angel's more of a, you didn't see anything, and we'll nuke you just to make sure that you said you didn't see anything.
Right. They present an overt face, right? They are the First Legion. They are the Dark Angels. There's that. They still subscribe to the sort of Principia Bellicosa, or what will become that, right? The chapter, the company, the squad, that task organization exists. But then within it, there are all these covert organizations that we'll get into. Actually, we should probably get into them right now. But I just want to let the listeners know that I think it's very important in terms of character to understand that covert secret societies within an overt organization have specific sort of consequences, and I think we're going to see that play out here over the next few chapters.
I will say, I've maybe jumping too far ahead, but with this aspect of their circles within circles and aspects is what made it so difficult, well, practically impossible for Horus to corrupt them with his own use of lodges, because they already had their own societies in place and had no need for it.
I was about to say and hypothesize with you, Jesse, about that as to whether or not, that's why that corruption or that form of corruption failed with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's mentioned in this book.
Very cool.
Yeah, I love it. I think we should get into page 87.
Let's do it. You want to kick us off, David?
Sure. So page 87 starts at the top with this full page call out. It's called The Hosts of the First Legion. In the days before the coming of their Primarch, the hosts of the First Legion were named and organized differently to the wings that were the later creation of Lionel Johnson. The foundation of the doctrine that would lead to the formation of the hosts is often credited to the Emperor himself in the histories of the Legion, a strand of the great plan that he had formed for their first of his legions. The list that follows is reconstructed from the records from 753.m30, a median point in the early history of the First Legion, and shows the main hosts still known to history, which would later be reconfigured into the 6 wings of the hexagrammaton. So, I think we're going to play a little game here. The way I think this would be really fun to do is, since we know the First Legion is sort of the template for the legions to come, a test bed, if you will, for the doctrine as it evolves and is coalesced into, the Principia Bellicosa. I can take a turn, or Jesse, you can take a turn and read the first host, and then we'll say who that sounds like.
Yeah, and I will say, you mentioned this before we started recording, and it did not click in my brain, these parallels. And as I'm reading through them, it's very eerie, and I'm kicking myself for not seeing it before, and it's really cool. So thank you for bringing this up beforehand.
Yeah, absolutely, man. This is why we do this.
But yeah, so on page 87, we have, 9 different hosts. And starting with the first one, the Host of Crowns. Among the oldest of those hosts, still known in the record of the First Legion, being the original core of the First Legion's warriors who had served as champions among the vast hosts of the pre-Unity armies on Terra. The Host of Crowns specialized as line breakers and vanguard warriors, experts in the honor duels that had once been a key feature of mankind's wars and icons of victory as much as they were fighters. So a host of champions. This one's a little trickier than some of the others. But you could think of almost the Emperor's Children in a way. You could think of...
I was thinking Ultramarines for some reason.
Ultramarines is a very strong one as well.
Yeah. Just because I hear honor duels and icons of victory, and to me, Gilliman with all of Ultramar, his tiny little kingdom, makes me think of that. But
Sure.
but I could totally
Okay.
see. Oh, go ahead, Jason. Sorry.
So my thoughts immediately went to the Templar Brethren because
Oh,
the first company of the Imperial
Imperial
Fists,
fists, yeah.
because when they were broken off into eventually into the Black Templar, they were essentially the same thing. Like they were completely focused around singular combat.
Hmm. But
So
what
the
about line
parallel,
breakers and vanguard warriors?
the Huskarls, the
Yeah,
second company in the Imperial Fists, are. No, I'm sorry. I think that's the third company. It's Fafnir Rand's company,
yeah.
which is interesting because the Imperial Fists, the bodyguards for Rogel Dorn, aren't drawn from the first company. They're drawn from Fafnir Rand's companies.
Mm.
But yeah, so duelists and line breakers are the Templar Brethren and the Phalanx Warders.
Dave, what about yourself?
Yeah, this is definitely, I think, the most nebulous, and it may not be a direct parallel, as we'll see in some of the other ones. But, I mean, I think The Emperor's Children is a clear one. I think I was actually going to say the Night Lords before they got corrupted and sort of became terror warriors. So maybe not a great parallel there. But I don't know, man. I think Jason's got some good arguments for this
Yeah.
one.
And also, let's keep in mind, there are 9 hosts here. So with 17 other legions that we know of, this could probably fit into several, because there are parallels between the legions as well, especially between the traitor and the loyalist legions.
right. And as the heresy goes on, they all kind of start blending a little more.
So who wants to take the next one?
I'll take the next one.
Okay.
The host of blades, the core of the legion as its numbers grew, and it took to the field as a true army. The host of blades were the infantry cohorts that formed the ranks and held against the assault of the foe, the gun lines that threw back their warriors, and the bold columns that shattered their lines. They were masters of close order infantry tactics that were the crux of the early Legiones Astartes order of battle, formed around the primacy of the Legion tactical squad and the principal agent in the development of the first volumes of the Principia Bellicosa, excuse me.
See, for this one, it feels a little more similarly matched to the Ultramarines due to their strict and narrow nature.
I could totally see that. And Ultramarines have always sounded like close order drills, very straight and forward to the point. I mean,
And development of the first volumes of the Principia Bellicosa, which Ultramarines love to write tactics down. So,
but also for some reason, I'm in the back of my head. I don't know why I'm thinking Imperial Fist, but it's the whole idea of like lines of infantry forming ranks and holding against a
drills.
foe.
and bolter drills, yep.
Yeah, that's really what did it for me.
See, I have a traitor bias, so I immediately thought Death Guard because their go-to was always the shoulder-to-shoulder advancing inexorable lines of dudes with bolt guns.
Yeah, well, that works too. We got
And
space
even
for 'em.
in their change, I'm just finishing up Lost in the Damned right now, but even once they've changed and hit Terra, it's still the same thing. They are very much still regimented and still just walking forward across the battlefield.
Yeah. So the next... Oh, go ahead, Dave.
No, I think that was a great point by Jason. And I think also the loyalists and traitor legions are all often mirror images of themselves, especially before they've sort of completely fallen into corruption and damnation. But yeah, man, Death Guard, 100%. So I think the host of blades, if it were me, would be the Ultramarines and the Death Guard, 100%.
Yeah. So the next ones are going to get pretty singular and pretty obvious which ones they relate to. So, Jason, you want to hit the next one?
Oh, sure. Let's see here. We've got the Host of Pentacles. Now little more than a forgotten legend to most, the Host of Pentacles was the earliest attempt to incorporate the war witches of old Earth into the line of battle, to bring the might of the Psyker to bear upon the foes of mankind. It was a host oft maligned by those its adepts fought alongside, for in its early days there were as many calamities as triumphs for the battle psychers of the First Legion, and in time it would be an experiment that was brought to a close by the Grand Master of the Legion. So if that's not like a tiny little self-important Nikea, I don't know what is.
Right?
And obviously, Thousand Suns. I'm pretty sure we can all agree on that one.
Oh yeah.
But you have little bites and tastes of word bearers too.
That's true, too.
Oh yeah, that's
For
a good
sure.
point.
Definitely for sure.
They do suffer a lot of warp calamities.
Yeah,
I do
that's
love
for
the
sure.
the title War Witches of Old Earth. I would love to
Right.
have that as a title of a short story at some point.
That sounds like a badass, like, Horus
Yeah.
Heresy themed metal band,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
War witches of old Earth.
Dave, you got any input?
No, I mean, obviously Thousand Suns, and it just makes you wonder, where the lion was at Nikea, or his proxy.
Well, Nikea was right before the heresy, correct?
Pretty soon before.
So he was still out on the eastern fringes at that point.
Oh, had they not even found him before the heresy?
No, they did, but he was still out. Like
He was crusading.
the mission of the Dark Angels to go out to the farthest reaches and kill the scariest stuff was still in order, and the line was out there. That's why he was not around for a lot of stuff.
Sure. No, I mean, yes, I say that sort of sarcastically. Why wasn't the line there? But I mean, like his proxy, right? Like,
Fair.
yeah, like the Khan wasn't there, but he sent, or was the Khan there? I can't remember now. I mean, there were.
Was.
No, I think
Yeah,
he sent
he was.
his proxy, right? He sent. Anyway, I'm sure there was some representative from the First Legion, but it just seems like, they had certainly experimented with some of this, which makes you wonder,
Like what
had
kind of
Malkador,
pointers?
yeah. There's a lot of good lore threads in here, but
For sure.
without further ado,
Yeah. Go ahead, Dave. Take the next one.
okay, the Host of Iron. Drawn at first from the hardy nomads of the Thulic tribes on Old Terra, adapting their ancient traditions to the modern battlefield, the Host of Iron was expert in the employment of armored vehicles on the field of battle. From the lumbering gun crawlers of Old Earth's pre-Unity armies to the war engines designed and built for use by the Emperor's Legionis Astartes, the Host of Iron would pioneer many of the strategies that underpinned their use on the battlefield.
First off, I want a gun crawler model. But I mean, let's be honest. This is Iron Warriors through and through, right?
As far as mechanized warfare, I feel like the Iron Hands also have a
Oh yeah.
heads up in that as well.
Definitely.
And the only reason I contradict that is, Pat, is because later on I feel like there's a very strong Iron Warriors one as well. Although that doesn't necessarily mean that they can't borrow aspects of the different hosts, obviously.
Most definitely. I mean, we've already mentioned like at least 3 different legions that can be represented by each one of these so far. So,
For sure. But what, Dave and Jason, which ones do you think would most closely represent the Host of Iron in this case?
For me, my first thought was Iron Hands, because on Medusa they have giant crawling cities. And like all of the, most of the clans have like these giant, massive crawler cities, which just makes me think of that stupid Mortal Engines movie. Like that, but way, way cooler. Like Iron Hands are way cooler than that stupid movie.
Hey, some of us enjoyed that movie, thank you very much, because it was stupid. So
My sincere professional condolences.
Okay.
I'm gonna go with like that but cooler.
All right, you heard it here, guys. Early Iron Hands are like that stupid Mortal Engines movie, but cooler.
but cooler.
Okay.
This is the official stance of the Remembrancer's Retreat.
I realize I skipped myself, so I'll take the next one. The Host of Fire. Among the most secretive of the early hosts, the ranks of the Host of Fire were filled with spies, assassins, and all the subtle tools of war. In war, it was the eye and bloody left hand of the Legion, the first to take to the field in the form of infiltrators and lone invigilators, and the last to draw blood, and its interrogator consuls were widely feared for their talent. Getting a strong Alpha Legion vibe here.
But you could also pull some Night Lords into this too, I feel like.
This is true too.
But also, interrogators are a huge part of the Dark Angels later on,
True.
right?
Mm-hmm.
They have the whole interrogator chaplain shtick.
Yeah. Yeah, and keep in mind that the Fire Wing is one of the main wings of the Legion at this time too, or it evolves into the Fire Wing, so they still maintain that as well.
Yeah, I mean, they're not perfect parallels, but definitely Alpha Legion and I think Raven Guard. I can see that.
Oh,
Yep,
yeah.
yep. All right, Pat.
All right. The Host of Bone, sometimes known as the Scandic Host, both for the wild and bloodthirsty tactics that were its preference, as well as the primary recruiting grounds of its warriors. The Host of Bone fought not to break the lines of a single army, but to crush the spirit of the foe entirely, seeking to find the weaknesses that almost all enemies hide and then cut it apart. Reavers without equal, they gave little credence to the noble ideas of civilized warfare and brought the most terrible weapons and tactics to the field of battle. So I have two legions in mind, because definitely getting a lot of wolves vibes from this. Let's be honest.
I was getting some notes of World Eaters as well.
Yeah, and World Eaters, but there's some Sons of Horus in here too. There's a company of Reavers that their whole job is to find a weakness and exploit it.
Yeah.
But also, definitely World Eaters and wolves. But go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Jason, David?
All right. See, I'm glad we're talking this over, because, I never thought Sons of Horus. My first thought was Night Lords. They're definitely all about crushing the spirit of the foe entirely.
Yeah.
And oddly, I never thought World Leaders either, which you really think would be my go-to, but... So, all right, that's a...
Really? You didn't get World Leaders out of that?
Somehow, no.
Bloodthirsty tactics didn't highlight itself to you in your mind.
I was thinking more of a Scandic Host.
Yeah,
Up in the northern.
that's how you say it. Yeah,
Scandic.
Yeah, I think the wolves and the World Eaters, they're sort of the the yin and the yang. They both jumped out at me.
Yeah. Cool. Go ahead, Jason.
All right. So these guys, the Host of Stone, I'm a big fan of, because I learned recently it's the only one of the host symbols I can freehand. So, experts in the static arts of war, of siege, and the destruction of fortifications, the grim demeanor of these warriors is a key feature of many of the most bitter defenses and bloody assaults in the early years of the Great Crusade. For to the adepts of the Host of Stone, all war was but a simple matter of determination. Those that did not yield to the foe, who stood impassive in the face of utter destruction, would find victory, and those who gave way would be crushed underfoot.
Yeah, I can go ahead.
Yeah. Immediate Iron Warrior vibes, right?
Yeah, you can crack open the can and immediately smell the Iron Warrior coming out of this one. So
Right.
fair enough. I regret And I pull my bid from the Host of Iron to put Iron Warriors on the Host of Stone, because this is just all them.
So, one thing I kind of wanted to talk about here, since we had talked about both the Imperial Fists and the Iron Warriors, and I think this kind of highlighted it neatly, and nobody other than Imperial Fists players have I ever had the same discussion with. I think it's interesting because a lot of people, I think, make a sort of erroneous comparison between the Iron Warriors and the Imperial Fists. Yes, they were constantly at odds, but I think way too often people kind of portray them as just the exact same legion, except one's a traitor. But here with the Host of Stone, I think it underlines a lot of the differences the Iron Warriors have compared to the Imperial Fists. I think a reflection, like a mirror image, is a much better idea because they're not identical. They're kind of reversed in a couple of ways. Like the Iron Warriors are all about destroying fortifications and how to bring them down. The Imperial Fists are about erecting them.
Yeah.
The Iron Warriors are all about the mathematics of war, where every single warrior is faceless and just a number in that equation, where the Imperial Fists take individual honor to the extreme, to the point that their first captain, the only thing he's good at is one-on-one honor duels. Fafnir Ran even says, no, the first captain doesn't know anything about war. He's just a pretty figurehead.
That's a great line.
Right? That's why Templar is one of my favorite audio dramas of all time. It's Fafnir Ran is the best Imperial Fist. Because he just straight up says to a human, Sigismund doesn't know anything about war, but maybe if he lives long enough and hangs out with me, he'll learn a couple things.
Yeah. I think it even gets reinforced in either Saturnine or the First Wall.
It's the first wall, actually.
It is. Yeah, and Fafnir Rand's no, don't send Sigismund. And Rogel Dorn's yeah, you right. I mean, for real, though.
He actually saves his ass, if I remember correctly, right?
No, he
not
does,
good at it.
Yeah.
He's just, Sigismund is not good at it.
He's a pretty face for the Legion.
Yeah.
But he managed to distract Fulgrim for a little bit, so.
Yeah.
Good to hear.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to spoil that for you.
Oh, no worries. Not quite made it all the way through.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Want to take the next one, Dave?
Is the Host of Wind?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I feel like you guys kind of know where this is going. Skirmishers and cavalry warriors. The Host of Wind excelled where warfare moved at the speed of the storm. That was their namesake. Experts in the use of light armor and jet bikes, as well as swift assault troops, the Host of Wind enjoyed a reputation as one of the most glorious in the First Legion, though it also bore one of the highest tallies of the dead for its reckless valor.
Yeah,
so
white
death
scars,
guards, right?
Oh.
Yeah. No, just kidding. Go ahead.
Obviously, some white scars there, and potentially blood angels as well, regarding assault troops being swift and whatnot.
Yeah, that's a good point. What's the traitor parallel to that, Jason?
I'm really, really glad you brought this up because I love this discussion. I can't stand it when people say Night Lords and Raven Guard are the two, traitor loyalist opposites. I think Night Lords are far more adequately paired to the White Scars, and I'll tell you why. Raven Guard are all about sneaky stealth. Night Lords are absolutely not about stealth. There are tons of times in the books that they will intentionally use stealth only so far as it allows them to make a terrific entrance. They are all about if White Scars were just sadistic, their battle plans would look almost the exact same as the Night Lords, short of skinning people.
Yeah, when it comes to
They're
stealth,
both all about those. I mean, it's just kind of that loyalist propaganda. Because what's a heroic like assault like from the host of the wind, if not a lightning terror assault, just prettied up a little bit.
Right, as far as stealth goes, I would imagine the Night Lords, you know the Night Lords are there, probably because your sun has just been blacked out. The stealth is kind of gone at that point, other than just,
There's guys in midnight black falling upon your troops and cackling. Like, I mean, come on now.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say it again, even though the next one kind of is close to them, but the idea of swift assault troops reminds me of the Sons of Horus main tactical doctrine, which is the spearhead, or the tip of the spear. So, sorry, Jason, you were saying.
What was I saying? It's been a long night. But Dave, I really appreciate that setup, because that's something that frustrates me a little bit, and I really appreciate. Even the War Sage, Malkarian, he even says that surprise is a blade that is useless in war. It breaks as soon as troops rally or commanders hold the line. That's why their entire sort of battle tactics don't revolve around like surprise, like, with the White Scars, like, surprise, we're here, they shoot some stuff and then they're gone. It survives around using those lightning tactics to create this sense of pervading fear that makes everything break down.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, Jason. I think, like the Night Lords often try to be, or appear to be, everywhere at once, just to sow that confusion, which is very much what the White Scars try to do. So yeah, I love that. I love that comparison and sort of perspective.
All right. I'll cap us off with the final one, the Host of the Void. One of the last hosts to emerge as a major force within the Legion, the Adepts of the Void were masters in the use of teleport assaults from low orbit, as well as war amongst the heavens themselves. Shock assault infantry equipped with teleport displacement beacons, shipboard assault cadres, and aircraft pilots were all to be found within the hosts once the First Legion reached the stars in the wake of the wars on Old Earth. This one can be a little bit tricky, too, because we only got a handful that really do a lot of the teleportation tactics. At least endgame, but I'm sure all of them to some extent do.
I don't know, I feel like there can be but one.
Which one are you thinking?
It's got to be the Sons of Horus. It's the 16th Legion.
Yeah,
I mean, other legions do teleport assaults.
And other legions have aircraft pilots.
But nobody... the tip of the spear.
The Justarin.
Yeah.
Pretty much
You've
the host of the void.
You've got Justarin and then shock assault infantry, so Reavers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there are several scenes. Shipboard assault cadres, so there are multiple scenes with on ships of Sons of Horus, breachers, and assault squads. Yeah. I know. I'm thinking of other legions that use a lot of teleportation. I'm trying to think.
I mean, the Imperial Fists do a good job of it, for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, Rogel Dorn is the head of the Imperial fleet, at least. So, or the defenders of Terra, that Imperial fleet. But I don't know.
So out of these hosts, the only legion we didn't touch upon was the Salamanders. Is there any host here you feel could fit any of these, or could fit the Salamanders?
I feel like the Salamanders are like the moral opposite end of the spectrum from the Dark Angels, because they're one of the only legions concerned with civilian casualties, whereas the First Legion is all about like eradicating and irradiating, worrying about human settlements a far, far second. Because they're not even concerned with compliances most of the time. They're about destroying the things that may threaten compliant worlds.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that was intentional or not, but
Yeah. You could pull line breakers and vanguard warriors out of the host of crowns for them, maybe, but they're not like, I can't think of an instance where there's a big honor, like they're big on honor duels or anything like that. But Jason does bring up a point that like they're the opposite of the Dark Angels.
I am woefully inadequate on my salamanders lore. Like I don't actually know what their tactics are. I mean, other than I think they have a lot of,
flamers,
sort of melta weaponry, and they can flamers, and they can withstand a lot of. But you know what? I feel like, is that something that I'm just ignorant of, or has it just not been explored in the lore?
Don't forget, it's also a hammer, Dave.
And hammers, yeah.
Yeah, and hammers and fire drakes. Oh.
So are they siege breakers? Are they like? Is that what they do?
Part of me feels like, and again, we may need to do a deep dive on salamanders one of these days, and maybe pull in Robbie. Yeah, next season.
Salamanders.
But I feel like they are the antithesis of good guy, in that, and there's just a lot of fire. But I could be wrong. I mean, whatever.
We're showing our ignorance here, guys. Let's close up this episode. Quick. Thanks again.
We only care about our own legions.
Any last statements before I wrap it up?
I think that's it for me. I thought we'd just go into
little housekeeping.
Yeah.
Yep. So, like on our Facebook page, which you can find us at facebook.com/RR30K podcast. Let's see, we mentioned back 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. There's the comment from Anton, and excuse me if I butcher this last name, Bexelius, I want to say. He brought up some decent points that had Dave and Jason and everybody else on the cast actually kind of thinking about. And the first one was, and this is based off of our last episode, the idea that the Emperor made a Faustian bargain with the Chaos Gods to create the Primarchs. Has anyone besides Chaos and their ilk, known liars and truth twisters, said anything supporting this theory? So in this case, some of the things we talked about were, first, Magnus remarks on it and talks about it in A Thousand Sun, and then I think there's even a scene where the Emperor on Moloch passes through the gate there into the realm of chaos to steal knowledge. And I'm trying to think of, and I think those are our two main sources, and we even pointed them out in our comments. But
right, it's I think it's Vengeful Spirit. It's fairly early on in the Horus Heresy, where Horus goes to Moloch to go essentially retrace the footsteps of the Emperor after he's been wounded on Davin. Right, he sort of gets the the
chaos
flash.
paddles of life.
He gets the flash.
I think Abaddon actually brings it up because he's guarding the portal while Horus goes through, is that Horus comes back out and he looks like he's fought 1,000 wars. And I feel like there's a line, and I'll have to look for it. But they talk about, and Horus talks about how he fought for his power from the gods of chaos, whereas his father did not. So that's something to think about.
Well, I think the important point here is that we know the Emperor went through the gates, the portal, on Moloch to meet with the Chaos Gods, right? They played poker. The Emperor cheated, got the knowledge to make the Primarchs, and sort of, where all that is. I would be sort of remiss to say, but I think that's an important source. But Jason, you had a couple other sources too.
The first one, and that always came to mind for me, was Magnus. During Thousand Sons, he talks about the entities that his father made and reneged on bargains with, that he had spoken with one of them as well. Now, he doesn't call it a chaos god, but of course, we know.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest.
We know. Everyone knows. Come on, Magnus. Just...
And so our listener brings up a good point. How can you trust Magnus? But I feel like even at that point it's not quite the heresy when I think Magnus talks about this. I think you can trust him in this case, because up until the wolves attacking Prospero, Magnus only has the Imperium at heart, or his father's best wishes at heart. So there's no reason to suspect anything.
I'd agree with most. I wouldn't go that far, but yeah, as far as Magnus's motivations. But yes, at that point, he was not really a traitor in the sense of the Horus Heresy.
I mean, what is a traitor, really? If we're going to get into it, isn't the Emperor kind of the original traitor?
That's another episode for another time, I think.
Right.
But, and also, Anton mentions, we were discussing last episode regarding Mars. And apparently, pre-Imperial Mars did constantly raid Terra for resources and possible archaeotech. I didn't see exactly where that was mentioned at.
Yeah.
But I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, I mean, it makes perfect sense. I mean, we know that Mars has been sending out exploratory fleets for hundreds of years before the Emperor gets his act together and actually goes to Mars and brokers a deal with them. So it would make perfect sense that Mars needs resources because Mars doesn't have a whole lot of resources. Well, there's this big blue orb where there's a bunch of barbarians fighting each other. Yeah. They're not going to notice. Let's go ahead and steal their iron and shit.
And their moms.
Yeah. What?
Because Mars needs moms, guys.
Son of a bitch.
Yeah. God damn it, Jesse. Oh. Yeah, no, I mean, that's completely believable, and I'm sure it's in 27 different White Dwarfs, you know, or any of the Horus Heresy books, to be honest.
Yeah. Also, I'd like to think, this is really late, but Tom, I don't know, I won't give your last name out, sent us a bunch of pictures of old Index Astartes books, and we will get into them at some point. Sorry, it's been a heck of a past few weeks, and I feel like I've just been in a fever dream. But yes, I see the messages. Thanks again for sending us those screen captures of old White Dwarfs. So I appreciate that. Yeah,
much appreciated, man. Yeah, no, I think that's it for housekeeping.
All right, cool. Once again, thank you all for listening. Facebook and Twitter at /RR30K podcast. You can visit our website, rr30k.com, where you can also find our Battlefleet Heresy Compendium, which is our supplement to Battlefleet Gothic, set in the Age of Darkness. You can follow our Instagram at remembrancers_retreat. Follow our Discord server with a link in the description of this episode. Be sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever you listen to us. In fact, just subscribe on all the platforms. We'd appreciate it.
We'd really appreciate it.
You can find our RSS feed on the link as well, so you can just copy and paste that into whatever you'd like to listen to. Huge shout out to our patrons. It's these guys that make this possible and keep us motivated to keep on doing this. Starting with our Legion Praetors, Alex Self, Chris Mack, Jacob Dillon, Gardner.Tree of Woe, Joe from Music City Heresy, Luke Rizzuto, Matthew Boyce, Mr. Baldwick, Nicholas Quenga, Sar Luther. On to our Legion Centurions, Andrew N., Angry Boy, John Christensen, M. Tanzer, Queen Corswain, Scott LeMay, and the original Applesauce. And finally, our Legion Sergeants, Duncan, Emily O'Hare, Garrett Lowe, Mr. Sear, Nick Gillen, The Zoy, and What Do I Call Myself? Again, huge shout out. Thank you all so much for your patronage. And that's all I have for this episode.
Thank you all for listening.
We had a great time. Bye for
Bye.
now. Take it easy, guys. Have a good night.